Hello everyone, and thank you for coming to another video. In this video I'm going to do a what is in my camera bag video. Basically go through all my equipment, tell you a little bit about the equipment I use, and hopefully this will be helpful for anyone who is contemplating getting into photography and looking at certain particular lenses. And let's get to it. So obviously I have a standard camera bag here. This one's called a Pullman. It's just a standard cheap bag you pick up for about 30 quid. Here we have a large Bellora bag. I highly recommend these because they're well built. Basically you'll get virtually all your lenses in one bag. It'll be a bit of a tight squeeze if you've got lots of lenses, but this is the bag you need. Retailing for around £60 to £80. Anyway, I wanted to go through what lenses I've got, so without further ado, let's move this out of the way and put it here. It's quite heavy. So, what shall we start off with? Right, this lens is the 10 to 18mm lens. It's really good. It's 4.5 to 5.6. It's quite a handy little lens, and if you're interested in doing any sort of interior photography, you know, if you're in the business of selling houses, this is the lens you want, because the maximum aperture is quite small, but you don't need a 2.8 lens for interiors. It's also good for outside, but generally speaking you're going to be using this lens at f8, so you're going to want a tripod, and basically you will get anything in the shot you want. Basically this will get a full room in your shot easily, but generally you'll pick this lens up for around £250. You'll have to basically buy a lens hood separately, which is a bit annoying that Canon don't include it, considering the likes of Tamron and Sigma do include one. Basically your filter thread is 67mm, and this is in the FS lens, so but it has IS, so that is a good lens if you want to do landscapes or interiors. So that starts our roundup from 10 to 18mm. Full frame wise, it's starting out at around 28mm, something like that. Don't quote me on that. But basically it's 10 to 18mm. So that's our wide angle lens that we use. Sometimes on full frame cameras, if you're zoomed out a little bit and the back of the zooming action protrudes a little bit into the back of your camera, there is a possibility of your mirror hitting the back of the lens. So that's why they suggest don't use crop sensor lenses with full frame. But it's not to say you can't use them if you're careful. Right, here's one of my favourite lenses. This is the Sigma 17 to 50mm lens. I got this for around £300. Basically it's a crop sensor camera lens, what they call a C lens. Basically it'll fit on your crop sensor APS-C cameras, but it will fit on full frame cameras as well. You just got to be mindful that the mirror doesn't hit the back end of your camera lens, but generally speaking the only disadvantage is you'll see a black ring around where the actual lens isn't covering. But if you're willing to crop, there's no reason why you can't use that on full frame. So it's got no manual override focus. Basically what that means is when the lens is in autofocus, you can't rack the focus ring because you could damage the motor. Has optical stabilisation. It does have obviously your standard manual and autofocus switch there, so it's not a big problem for me just to put it into manual, and it's a 2.8 aperture, so that's a really good lens, and something I use if I'm going out in low light situations. So that's a 17 to 50mm APS-C lens. Right, here is probably one of my favourite lenses, which is the Mark 1 70 to 200mm 2.8 Canon IS lens. Basically it's got 3 stops to stabilisation rather than 4 compared to the version 2. Basically it's got minimum focus of 1.4 meters to 2.5 to infinity. You've got autofocus and manual override, so when it's in autofocus I can still adjust the focus without damaging anything. It has image stabilizer on and off, obviously, and it has stabilizer mode 1 and 2. 1 is just standard, up and down, sideways, and number 2 is for panning, basically. So that's another favourite of mine, and I always keep hold of that for doing close-ups. Now I do keep hold of this lens. This is the actual kit lens that comes with most of your cameras. This is the 18 to 55mm. I believe it's 4.5. No, it's 3.5 to 5.6, and this is the version 2. IS, autofocus and manual focus. It's really light though, so if you want to pop your camera in a small bag with this, it's hardly noticeable the weight, so it's quite handy to carry if you don't want to carry heavy equipment with you, because obviously the Sigma equivalent, which obviously is a better aperture on it, is probably 2 or 3 times the weight of this. So if you do want to go light, the kit lens is ideal. So what else do we have in our bag? Well, we have the 2x extender. Now these are the version 1s. The version 2 extenders tend to be web sealed, slightly better optically, but not by much. And the version 3 apparently is a lot better. But to be honest, you're not going to see that much of a difference. And if you're wondering how it's configured like this, basically that's just an extension tube. So you know, if you have a look in there, you can see you just attach it. And I was watching a wildlife photographer who carries it like that because it's convenient to have basically your 1.4 extender and your 2x extender all in one package, and you can always attach that onto your 200mm lens, and obviously you've got a good 400mm wildlife lens if you want to use it, and it's comparable in quality to the new 100 to 400 Mark II lens in quality. Well, that's a lot of research that I've done that sort of indicate that. So that's why I sort of kept the 200 and had the teleconverter. So here we have probably one of my favourite lenses. This is the 150 to 600 contemporary Sigma lens. Basically f5 to 6.3. You've got autofocus, manual override and manual focus. You've got various limited options on there, such as full, 10 meters to infinity and 2.8 to 10 meters. You've got optical stabilization, mode 2 and 1, and you can actually turn it off as well if you want to. Obviously mode 2 would be panning, mode 1 is normal. And interesting to this lens is the custom C2 and C1 modes. So if you buy the Sigma dock, you can basically customise the limiter on this and the autofocus speed a little bit, and you can get firmware updates, you know, which this has recently been updated, and I found it really quick and nails focus most of the time. So that's the Sigma. here we have the 300 f4 prime lens, which is really good quality, it's really sharp. At f8 with the 1.4 teleconverter, it's probably just as good as the 400 5.6 lens, and obviously you retain autofocus at 5.6 on most camera bodies. Now the stabilizer, you've got mode 1 and mode 2, so mode 1 is obviously for up and down, side to side, and then mode 2 is for panning. In terms of autofocus speed, it's comparable to the 70-200 Mark 1 that I've got. Basically, minimum focus is 1.5 meters to infinity, and you do have an option for 3 meters to infinity on the limiter. Autofocus and manual focus, and obviously you can adjust the focus on this lens when it's in autofocus, and that's a fantastic lens to get. If you're on a budget and you can't afford a zoom, or you prefer a prime, you know, consider the 300 f4 with IS and a 1.4 teleconverter at 420mm. It should be more than enough. On the crop sensor camera, obviously it's going to be probably something around 680mm, something like that. So that's a good lens to have. So let's talk about cameras, what I have here. So here we have the 7D. I suppose in today's world, in comparisons to the Mark II, it's probably aging a little bit, but it also means you can pick it up at a bargain price on second-hand websites. So I've never experienced any problems with the 7D. It's fantastic. Basically, I'm getting 8 frames a second. It's really quick, no major issues with it. I like the ability to do video as well. Obviously it's only going to be HD, but it's good enough. So let's have a look what my other backup camera I've got here is. Now here, I can try and get it out of the bag, is the 600D. Basically it has the flip out screen, which is really handy if you want to do like selfies. Personally, would I recommend this camera to anyone? Probably not. Generally, if you're doing raw images, it tends to choke the buffer after 5 shots, so it's not ideal. If you're just going to do weddings, I think it's good enough for that. You know, if you want to use some of these wide angle lenses, but generally you might want to stick to full frame if you're doing weddings. But as a backup camera, it's probably not bad because it's really light, really small. You can take the battery grip off, obviously. You can see how small it is, and if you were to put the 10-18mm lens on that, it's quite a compact camera really. So, you know, if you want to go small, say you've got a job on a cruise ship or something, and you don't want to take much with you, that's quite a good backup camera. Now the last of my cameras I have here is the EOS 1D. Now this is the Mark III, so again this is quite old. Now you might ask, why have I got an old 1D camera? Well, you can pick it up quite cheap these days. I think I picked this up for around £400. Basically the 7D a year ago cost me that, and I think the 600D, before I forget, was around 300. So this is good. The only downside is it's only 10 megapixels, as I think I've not mentioned yet. This is the 7D's 18 roughly. It's roughly the same amount for the 600D. But obviously this 1D Mark III, basically it's quite old, it can't do video, it's only 10 megapixels, but it is a really good camera, really professional grade. What I like about it most of all isn't really how many pictures it can take a second. This can take 10 obviously, because it's really fast. But I like the battery in it. This battery will outlast both of these two cameras, and probably more some, because the battery is huge. Let me just show you it. You know, it's basically got 23,000 AH, and it's 11.1 volt. So it's significantly more powerful than any battery you've got in these two cameras. So you can go shooting all day long with this, and probably shoot all day long the next day as well, without even thinking about changing the battery. I could never hope to do that with these two cameras. Obviously, a disadvantage, you can't do video. So if you want to go out and do video, I'm going to have to take one of these two cameras with me. Generally, I pair the 7D with the 1D Mark III with two lenses, and I can shoot all day long with that gear. One more thing that's very important when you go out shooting is you want to get some sort of strap. Now, I found a strap like this where you can attach two cameras to both of these tripod mount things, which basically just screws in to the tripod mount, and you can have that on your shoulders all day long with two heavy cameras, and I really like that. That other carrying straps, cases out there you can buy. The 150 to 600 Sigma lens, if I go and do wildlife and sports, this is the lens I'm going to want to take with me, because it gives me 600mm and I get quite good quality with it, and it's not heavy too much. This is the contemporary version, not the sport version. The sport version is 3.2 kilograms. This is around 2.1 kilograms. It's about the same weight as the Tamron, the 150 to 600. But if you want to go out and do wildlife and you've got good light, use that lens. However, if it's getting a bit dark and you want to get some close-up pictures, but you're too far to use the 2.8 70-200, possibly consider the 300 f4 lens. You can have the teleconverter on, make it 5.6, take it off, make it f4, so you'll get really sharp images with that. To be honest, without the teleconverter on there, the results on this will be probably as good as a 500 f4 lens. It's just a matter of getting closer to your wildlife. But sometimes wildlife comes too close, and big Sigma lenses like this have a minimum focus of 2.8 meters. So this lens can focus up to 1.5 meters. So this sometimes can be better if something comes close. That's why I have two cameras on me most of the time. So if the Sigma, I'm too close for that, I can always switch to the 300 f4 or the 70 to 200 2.8 lens. So let's talk about the 70 to 200. Generally, when it's really starting to get dark, or it's sunset or sunrise, this is when you want to be using this lens, because you've got that 2.8 aperture, means it lets a lot of light in, really handy, ideal for sports. You can stick the 2 times teleconverter on if you want to, so you'll get 5.6, or f4 if you use the 1.4 teleconverter on there, making this near enough 300mm without a crop factor. I think it's 280mm with the 1.4 or 400 with the 2x. So I would probably say that lens is probably pretty good for sports. This lens, as I said before, the 10 to 18mm, is ideal for basically doing landscapes or interiors, basically. If you are selling your property or you want to get into property photography, that is a lens I would recommend. The general purpose outside, street photography, going out and about, doing cityscapes, as I said, street photography. When it's starting to get a bit dark, 2.8 aperture on that comes in really handy. You could probably get away with using that indoors as well if you you know, you want to do interiors. The only problem with that is it's not quite wide enough sometimes, so that's why you might want to consider the 10 to 18 if you want to do indoor work. And the last lens we have here, as I've already mentioned, but I just wanted to go through them quickly, is the 18 to 55mm kit lens. Obviously it's not going to be quite as good as these other lenses in terms of optical quality. However, it's not to say you can't get good results. Now, I want to dispel the myth that you need a lens like this to be a professional photographer and create brilliant results. It is possible to create award-winning results with this lens. Clearly, if you're doing wildlife, this is no good because you're too far away and there's no point cropping. You might be able to get away with it if you were using the, I think it's the 5DRS, which is 50 megapixels. But generally you're going to need a big lens if you're doing wildlife or sports such as football or motorsport, something like that. But for you guys that are just learning and developing your skills, the kit lens can produce results that you can sell. It's very possible to obtain and produce work that is sellable with the kit lens. What is quite handy about the kit lens is it's light, very light, and you've got image stabilization on there as well. I would probably say this is probably more than capable of producing good studio work, but because sometimes you need to gain more light into your studio, I would always recommend for a faster lens, and I would highly recommend the Sigma 17 to 50mm lens. Now obviously it's not as well built as a Canon, it rattles a little bit, if you can hear that. But basically this Sigma DC EX HSM lens is as good as a Canon in terms of autofocus speed, but you don't want to be too concerned with autofocus speed when it comes to short focal lengths, because the focus is quick like that. You will never have a problem with autofocus speeds. So I just wanted to go through roughly the equipment I've got here. If I was to tell you which is the best camera I've got here, I'd probably say the 7D, because it's just as good as a video camera as it is as doing fast shutter speed, taking pictures, that sort of thing. 600D is your budget camera basically, and it's quite cheap, it feels cheap, but because of the articulating screen it's pretty handy at doing selfies. So if you want to do some selfies with a wide angle lens. Now a lot of people have said the ideal choice with this is the 10 to 18mm. If you want to do selfies or YouTube blogs, consider the 10 to 18mm and marry it with a cheap entry-level digital SLR. So if you are interested in doing YouTube videos and you want to get yourself set up to do videos or photography on the cheap, possibly look at the 500D, 600D or 650D, marry it up with the 10 to 18mm lens, which is fairly cheap. You could probably get both of those for about £500, and that's a cheap setup really to do YouTube blogging. Just thought I'd throw that out there so you guys might be interested in that. If you are like me and you want to do sports photography, I think ideally there's only two options at the moment, well, three options if you include the 100 to 400 Mark II Canon lens. But be mindful that some of the budget cameras won't be able to power the autofocus as quickly as the more expensive 1D models, such as the 1DX and the 5D Mark III. But generally speaking, if you want to do sports or wildlife, you're going to need 5 to 600 millimeters. Another lens I don't have here, but I would certainly suggest it and recommend it, is the Canon 500 f4 lens. Unfortunately, it's a lot of money. You can pick it up probably second hand between £2,000 and £3,000. New, it's around 6, and I think it's even more than that for the Mark II. Anyway, I hope this video has been informative about these lenses and the cameras I've got here, and thank you for watching.